I had access, because I was the Jewish chapel lead clerk. I had access to a typewriter, manual typewriter, and I would print out the paper. I would type up something, print it out. Since it's hard to edit it on a manual typewriter, I would use my contraband cell phone to take pictures of each page, and then I would upload it to make it a Microsoft Word document. So I have all my book written until the time I'm released from jail.
Okay, very good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome once again to the Changemaker series, a series of one-on-one talks with none other than Robert Katz. As we've said in the past, the series hopes to inspire each and every person who participates to make a difference in a positive way, to inspire each and every person to realize that they can make a difference in a positive way. Tonight we have the honor of hosting once again Yehudah Pryce. To say an illustration of the power of positive change is truly an understatement. It is an inspiring story, and I hope there is much inspiration that can be drawn from this experience, and that many will feel even more enthusiastic to, one, do more good for themselves, and two, to do more good for others. I want to just, for a moment, there's a very important Gemara that is taught. The Talmud teaches that Mokom Shebale Teshuva Oimdim Ein Tzadikim Gemurim Oimdim, that the place where a person who does Teshuva, a person who goes through a process of repentance stands, even a Tzadik Gomur, even a completely righteous person cannot stand. From the feedback from last week, Yehudah, and the feelings that so many of us had post the talk, I want to say the following. I said it to you privately, but I'm going to say it publicly now. This journey of yours in relation to your capacity to impact others is just beginning. It is such an important lesson. I'm not sure that you even understand how important it actually is. It's so important on so many levels. It impacts the way that we relate to one another. It impacts how we treat one another. But perhaps as importantly, or even more importantly, it impacts greatly on how we view ourselves and how we have, or if we have, the courage to be able to embrace change. The concept of a Baal Teshuvah is the concept of transformation. It's the concept of elevation. It's the concept that we all need to subscribe to, that regardless of where we come from, regardless even of what we have done, as long as we are here, we have got the opportunity to do more with ourselves, to do more with life itself. And in fact, through that process of transformation, tremendous, tremendous heights are able to be accomplished, even more so than when the road is, so to speak, a lot more simple, to say the least. Nonetheless, I want to say to you, Yehudah, Hashem should bless you, continue to bless you with the inspiration to be courageous regarding this journey that you have begun, to continue to inspire so many people, to continue to inspire your family, to continue to be inspired yourself. But please God, you should be blessed. You should be blessed with much bracha and atzlocha in this journey that you have begun. Without further ado, Rob, you want to take over?
Thank you, Rabbi. Yehudah, welcome back, and a warm welcome to our viewers, and especially our new viewers. Just to go through some formalities, we do take questions from the floor and comments to the extent that the questions and comments are relevant to the subject matter. We will make every single solitary effort to pose them to Yehudah tonight. we are respectful, Yehudah, of your time. When we asked you to come back, you did immediately say yes, but you wouldn't be able to give the full hour because of previous commitment. We're respectful of that. We're thankful for your time that you can give. And we will have a somewhat truncated program tonight in the morning by you, Yehudah, to be respectful so that you can meet your accommodation. So before we carry on, Yehudah, once again, thank you so very much for coming on our show. As the Rabbi alluded to, there was an unprecedented demand for you to come on. There was so much more that we wanted to discuss with you that we never got a chance to. We've got a great deal of questions which we're going to be putting to you. But just for our viewers that are new to Yehudah, I'm just going to spend 1 minute really on Yehudah's previous background. This show, version 2, is really where Yehudah Pryce is today in terms of his Yiddishkeit. But it's important to know where he came from. So Yehudah, before he was 24, was sentenced to more jail time than he was alive, 24 years. He served 16 years and found Judaism in jail. Since his release from prison, Yehudah graduated summa cum laude, earning a Bachelor of Arts in Sociology. He graduated with a 4 GPA from the University of Southern California, earning a Master of Social Work degree, and he begins his Doctor of Social Work degree program this month. Yehudah currently works as a program manager for a nonprofit organization in South Los Angeles, assisting homeless persons to find housing, and is a therapist at the Jewish Residential Addiction Treatment Center, Beit Tshuva. He completed his Giur in 2020 through the Rabbinical Council of California and was subsequently married. Yehudah, his wife, and 2 children currently reside in Irvine, California. Rabbi?
Okay, great. Thank you for that, Rob. So, Yehudah, even though we want to focus on Yehudah in the present, if I may, life prior to prison, would you have defined yourself as a criminal?
Would I have defined myself as a criminal? I think I would have defined myself in more stark terms. I would define myself as a gangster. You know, I had guns on me most of the time. I robbed drug dealers for a living. And so it wasn't simply a mistake or one bad decision. It was a lifestyle of poor choices, a lifestyle that I embraced and I took pride in. So yes, definitely criminal, gangster. That was who I was, or not who I was. That's the role I chose to be. And through your actions over and over again, it could define who you are.
And when did this change? When did you see yourself in a different light?
It was gradual, and it wasn't again, I think I mentioned last week, it wasn't an aha moment, but it was more so seeing my actions and who I want to be in contrast to my surroundings. And I didn't want to necessarily think and have the same sort of values that I had that I did as a teenager. So I went into jail at the age of 19. I was going in and out of juvenile hall prior to that, but the values and the way I thought then as a teenager in my 20s, I didn't want to be thinking the same way, and imagining myself in my 30s, I didn't want to be thinking the same way. So it was a gradual process that happened over time, and it was hard. And there were some slide backs. It wasn't just all linear, but I got to where I'm at over time, just working on myself.
Amazing. And what led you to this change?
So I felt like I could do the change without religion. So I don't want to act as if Judaism itself or my introduction to Judaism itself was the impetus for that change. I felt like I can live a moral life, and I actually tried to do it without religion. I had to quote Karl Marx, I believed that religion was the opium of the masses. And so I felt like a lot of people in jail, they turned to religion, and it was a weakness. They just couldn't handle being in jail, so they needed that opium, so to speak. And so I was against the change I wanted to do. I was against using religion as a crutch, so to speak, to accomplish that. But then I got introduced to Judaism, and as my rabbi in prison, Rabbi Moskowitz said, Judaism is about behavioral modification. So through the, the ethical paradigm and modalities of Judaism, inherent to Judaism, it was that gradual change of me working on my behavior and knowing that I was responsible. I was personally responsible for my behavior. And if I wanted to be part of the Jewish people, I was responsible to the Jewish people as well as Hashem with my behavior and my actions.
Amazing. And, just an observation, it requires a tremendous amount of courage. Where do you feel that you found this courage? Where do you feel was the source of this courage?
So maybe it was courage. Maybe it was, I don't know. I didn't necessarily think through all the consequences or natural consequences of all my actions. So at that point in time, I didn't necessarily know what trying to be a Torah observant Yid, all that constituted that at that time. But I liked to go down my own path as well. So being inside a prison, doing my own thing, I didn't have a problem with that. Now there was obviously a lot of embarrassment, not embarrassment, but looking at myself through the eyes of others, especially when I first donned my kippah. That was like the big turning point. When you don't have a kippah on, you kind of just blend in with everybody else, and whatever your thoughts you have in your head of what you want to be, you can just keep it to yourself. But when you wear that kippah, you're kind of making an announcement to everybody that you stand for something. A lot of people didn't even really know what Judaism entailed in prison, but they knew that I was signaling that I stood for something, and I was attaching myself to some sort of ethical paradigm that was outside the framework of a criminal ethos. And so the courage, I can't say necessarily where it came from, but I would also add to that the fact that I had the support from my mom and my sisters, my family, allowed me to be a little bit more confident, I think, in being able to take the chance and walk down a different path than I had previously been doing.
Thank you for that. And, as we've mentioned, and as you've mentioned, this transition is a massive transition. What would you recommend to someone else who's going through something similar, or certainly even going through something much less dramatic? What would you recommend as advice to anyone else?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't believe somebody has to go through something as dramatic as what I went through, because I think everybody, whatever trouble or trial or tribulations people facing, for that person, that is something as dramatic or as something as meaningful to where they're at in their life or how they're supposed to respond to that. And so I would say that, one, you should kind of look at what are the consequences of you continuing to operate the way you've been operating, to not change. What are the consequences of that? And then what are the benefits of changing? Because you don't want to make this kind of abstract where you're just thinking like, yeah, I need to do better. And if you don't make things concrete, I think you are going to be less inclined to actually make the change you need. And once you understand like what you are really, why you really are changing for, to kind of keep that in your mind. To me, I attached all this to a purpose, to a transcendent meaning, which is, inherent to Yiddishkeit and Judaism. So it wasn't just me simply making these personal changes just because, I thought it would better my life, but I also thought there was a transcendent component. And so if you're a Jew, you have this thousands of years of history connected to this transcendent purpose, connected to this transcendent God. And if you can try to keep all that in mind, which is not easy when the trials and tribulations hit you head on, sometimes we get a little decentered and little, on our heels. But if you can try to keep that in mind, you have a purpose. As a Jew, you have a holy purpose. And try to keep that in mind.
Yehudah, I'm not sure you're aware, but the first time you mentioned Yiddishkeit on this show tonight, you had a broad grin on your face. It was the widest grin. So obviously it brings a warmth to you. There you go. Okay. So where did your journey in Yiddishkeit begin? We did speak about your wife and your family on the show before, but something happened to Omar Pryce, and then you found Yiddishkeit. can you just spend a little bit of time on the moment that you realized that Judaism is who you are and what you want to be?
So it was a couple different forms. So when I got exposed to Judaism, when I was in that maximum security prison at Pelican Bay, it was a Reform Judaism. And to me, that was a safe Judaism to me, because it meant that I was still allowed to be not fully committed to anybody else's ideas of what I had to be committed to. I could kind of just do my own thing. And so that was my initial foray into Judaism. And so it worked for me at that particular time. That was the stage I was ready for. But after a while, thinking about these concepts of what it meant to be a Jew, what it meant to follow a one God, right? It doesn't really matter. I mean, if one were to say that, yeah, there is a God, but you don't necessarily have to follow anything specific, then to me, that seems like Hasbe Shalom, we're making ourselves God, or we're making God in our own image, or whatever we feel we want to do anyway, and we kind of just rationalizing that. And to me, that didn't sit well with me. I believed in there to be an objective reality and an objective arbiter of truth. Their emes existed and it was objective. And so it was over time. And again, I don't think for a lot of people, at least for people like me, that you can somehow believe that you can just automatically come to this conclusion and recognition of what Hashem is in your relationship to him. Perhaps if you're Avraham Avinu, you can just come to this conclusion on your own, but definitely not me. And so it was just practicing, just being involved in Yiddishkeit slowly. I taught myself, prayer book Hebrew. I memorized the Shmoneh Esrei. That was some of the first things I started doing. I'm like, all right, if I'm going to, be a Jew, I should learn some of the prayers. Again, that was just, my understanding of it. But the more I got involved, the more I recognized, this is what I want to do. And this was actually well before I met my wife. I met Lauren in 2014, and my introduction to Judaism was actually in 2010. And Orthodoxy, I would say, happened around 2012. And again, I say that with the qualifier that I wasn't perfect in it. I was by myself, without a community, without an Orthodox community, without an Orthodox rabbi. And my only really exposure to Orthodoxy was through the books that I was reading without a teacher or a Havrusa, and through whatever I could glean from, my contraband cell phone and my exploration in that way. But yeah, that's basically the trajectory of how I came to Judaism.
Wonderful. Yehudah, and we're going to take a question from the floor now. And just a reminder to our audience that the floor is open for questions to be posed to Yehudah. Are you by nature a very disciplined, rigid person? Because if you are disciplined and rigid, Judaism is the perfect place to be.
Discipline actually definitely helps you with Judaism, because to imagine somebody in jail giving up some of their freedom, right? I'm giving up my freedom of what I want to do with my free time, or how I want to live, even though my freedom is already circumscribed by, correctional officers and just the situation I'm in. So yeah, it does take a certain bit of discipline. I believe I am disciplined when I am committed to something. So when I'm not committed to anything, it's kind of anything goes. But when I was a criminal, when I was a gangster, I was committed to that. And you have to be committed and disciplined in a way if you don't care that you can get locked up, you can die, bad things can happen. So to me, it was about commitment. And I think I am disciplined, definitely disciplined in what I do. And so the transition into Orthodox Judaism wasn't as hard for somebody who doesn't necessarily like that sort of structure.
Yeah, on a daily basis, what has to happen. You had a question from the floor. Your siblings, you did mention your siblings in the previous show. Your relationships with them, their impressions of you today?
Okay, so my siblings, we have different fathers, same mother. We grew up in the same household, and I grew up with their father. So I have a great relationship. My brother, my stepbrother is going to come over here, or my half brother is going to come over here, later this week, or we're going to hang out a little bit. My sisters, specifically my sisters, they've been just such such a rock and such a support through my, the times I was in jail. I missed them graduating from high school. I missed them graduating from college. I missed them getting married. I missed so much of their life. I missed so much of my responsibility as a big brother to lead by example. But regardless of that fact, they still kind of stuck it with me. It's the same thing with my mom. If you could imagine for you to be a parent and then your child is incarcerated for a quarter century, and that has to bring a lot of shame and embarrassment. You imagine your coworkers asking, "Hey, where's your oldest son at?" Or, and it's a natural, for a parent to want to have pride about their child. And when their child goes out of their way to take away that pride and kind of bring that shame in, that's a rough thing to deal with. And my mom suffered a lot of, depression over that experience when I was first incarcerated. But we have a great relationship because they show me the definition of what unconditional love is. And they show me that they're not judging me by not just my worst actions, but continued actions that and they kind of just said, like, look, we're here for you. We love you and we'll always be here for you. And so that sort of love, I didn't need a tough love. I needed a love that kind of embraced me for who I was at the moment and imagined me for what I could be. So that love has carried me through. And so we have a great relationship right now. And they're very philanthropic. We're kind of, all our professions are kind of the same. My sister, she's a marriage and family therapist, works inside as a therapist in the county jail. My other sister, she does real estate, but she's a nurse as well. So we come from this kind of background of trying to pay it forward and do good. And they were kind of my role models in that as well.
Thank you. We're going to come back. We'd like to come back to the journey and what sparked and your investment in Judaism. But a couple of questions from the floor. Your children and their awareness of your background. How have you approached your relationship with them in this regard?
Well, so my son, 3 years old, so he doesn't understand a lot that's going on. I'm sure he'll understand it at some point in time, and we'll have that sort of discussion. My daughter, which was from her previous marriage, my wife's previous marriage, I've known her since she was 3. So she knew when I was in jail. We were Skyping and video chatting while I was actually in jail, so she understood. And I'm honest with everybody, and I was especially honest with her. Like, look, I didn't listen to my Ima and Abba, and so these are the consequences of not listening to your Ima and Abba. I'm a good example in that. But I also just told her, like, look, I wasn't living right. I was doing wrong things, and there's consequences to wrong actions, right? Even if you think the consequences are like totally out of proportion to what you did, that when you do wrong things and when you do bad things, that is more likely to happen. And so if you can be personally responsible with your own behavior and you could really own what it means to be a Jew, right? The kibbutz avim, that all the other things that go along with it, you can avoid the kind of situation that I've been in. And so she totally understands at least my evolution from what I was into now. And she doesn't judge me, and she embraces me with love and lots of smiles, and that makes me feel good, because I feel like if a kid can forgive you or not judge you for all the wrong you've done, like that's kind of how I want to approach the world, with those child eyes, where you don't let your bad experiences in life kind of jade you and make you cynical about how you approach people. And she kind of is an example of that for me as well.
Yeah, Yehudah, the overriding memory of the webinar last week, and many people have come to me to say that really the nerve-hitting sentence that you said is, don't judge a person by their worst behavior. So I think that's more or less what you're saying here again. Yeah. There's a heap load of questions coming in from the floor. I want to just deal with 2 questions in one, Yehudah, and then I want to move over to your life post-prison. But people are still asking about the prison, and I'm going to just ask 2 questions in one, Yehudah, and you can answer them how you wish to. I'm not sure you were if you spent a lot of time, did you spend a lot of time in solitary confinement, Yehudah?
I didn't spend a lot of time in solitary confinement. I did years in a one-man cell, but I was able to leave my one-man cell throughout times during the day. So it wasn't a lot during solitary confinement, though I've been in solitary confinement in Pelican Bay. I have.
Okay. So the question then is, we'll ask it a bit broader then. How did you cope? And then another question from another person is, it must have been an incredible trauma being in jail. Have you not needed extensive therapy? How do you cope from it all?
Well, and perhaps I'll talk about this a little bit later as well, as why I wanted to be a social worker and why I wanted to be a psychotherapist. But yeah, I mean, there's about, for people who are incarcerated, anywhere from 60-some% to 90-some% people encountered some sort of trauma prior to being incarcerated, right? These maladaptive responses to that trauma. People make the wrong choices in life, but jail itself is very traumatic. I mean, you're in a situation where it's designed to oppress you. You know, that's what it's actually designed. It's jail. So it's traumatic, and you're dealing with that sort of constant anxiety of something bad happening, because something bad was going to happen at a certain amount of time. And so you don't want to share your emotions because that's a weakness, the survival mechanism. And so these are sort of traits that I had to kind of embody while I was in that particular situation in my life. I haven't had a lot of extensive therapy. One would imagine that that's helpful, but a lot of people coming from my particular position, where it's that super hyper masculinity where you can't show any weaknesses, we're kind of reticent to do that. And so I've coped, the way I've coped is kind of is through Judaism, is through trying to engage even in my work of social work, though I haven't done anything specific, but there was definitely traumatic. And it's not only one particular event, but it's kind of the ongoing stressors of anxiety of knowing that when there's riots going on, where that something else happened that was racially motivated, knowing that if you're out of your cell, when something happens, like, you're going to have to participate. Doesn't matter how good or how much I'm trying to be, like, you're put in a situation where it's life or death. And that could take its toll on a person. Yes.
But Yehudah, or let's say just to release, the system doesn't give therapy to transition from an incarcerated situation to a life outside of prison.
So there are some supports that you can possibly seek for that to happen, right? Like, nobody ever approached me about therapy or that it's an option. I don't know it to be an option specifically, but perhaps it is. But there's another thing: when you've encountered a system that doesn't necessarily treat you as redemption as possible, that that still sees you as your worst mistake. At least that's my experience with the system, that I don't feel inclined to seek the help or ask them for particular help. Hey, do you know a therapist you can see? I can see, or anything like that. I'm kind of like, I want to disengage from anything connected to that. So I don't know if it's offered. It definitely wasn't offered to me. And even if it was offered to me, based on my previous experience, I don't know if I would have accepted it just because of how jaded I was.
Wonderful. All right, Yehudah, I think we want to move away now and more into where you are today, into Judaism and that sphere of influence, Rabbi.
So if we just take one step back in relation to your journey, you started off with an exposure to certain Reform people, thereafter through Orthodox books and an Orthodox rabbi, then eventually meeting your wife. Was there anything in particular that sparked off this journey? And secondly, or the same question, is there anything in particular relating to Judaism that really enticed you to begin with?
Again, when that Reform rabbi mentioned, when he mentioned that if you just look at the history of the Jewish people, you can see how Judaism has worked for them. And I thought about that, and I remember again seeing Judaism through the lens of other religions and other peoples. But I'm like, you know what? If the Jewish people were able to bring this God idea into the world that essentially influenced all the major religions and had such a profound effect on the world, and totally disproportionate to the size of the Jewish people, right? I don't know, like 2% of the world's population, or at least America's population, and having this outside effect on the world, especially spiritually, that, you know, this is something worthy of analyzing at least. And maybe it was more so for the academic sense. Like I said, I've studied other religions. I've read the Quran front to back. I've studied the Catholic study Bible. You know, I was reading into Buddhism, and a lot of it was academic in nature, because my default position at that point was agnostic. You know, whether a God existed or not, who knows? And so, since we don't know, you know, what's the point? That was sort of my overall approach. So when the rabbi gave me this sort of look at the Jewish experience throughout history, and I looked at it, how does a people survive pogrom after pogrom, diaspora for thousands of years, and then the reestablishment of their homeland after thousands of years, maintaining the language and religion? That's unprecedented. That just, I mean, and when you look at something that is unprecedented, you have to look at it like, maybe there's something. The reason it's unprecedented, maybe because there's something special to that. And so that sort of reasoning and that sort of logic kind of led me to explore more and more. And then, while Reform didn't necessarily stick with me, it's because, again, I didn't have a postmodernism that being subjective with everything, morality included, to me, that didn't really sit well with me, because I understood that certain standards of ethics, certain morality was better than other morality. And so I was looking for that ultimate paradigm of morality. And I found that within Judaism, just studying the way we, as Jewish people, were able to interact together. And it never was a specific, well, maybe if this government program were put in place, then we could be the Yids we were meant to be, right? Obviously, certain government rules and laws got in the way of what we wanted to do as a people with the freedoms, but we were always very self-reliant on Yiddishkeit and on the system of Judaism. And to me, that was so impressive. And it was actually a model for how, when people are facing oppression, how they can respond. So all these sort of things kind of coalesce together to make me more inclined to go towards this Orthodox Judaism.
And again, just out of interest, is there any one philosophy or one aspect of Yiddishkeit that really, you know, speaks to you, or something that you attach yourself to more than the holistic view of Judaism? And if it's not, and if it is the holistic view, that's also okay. But was there perhaps one idea or one lesson along the way that really spoke that which you've mentioned now?
Well, I can't necessarily give you a standing on one foot what Torah means, as Hazal has done in the past. But I would say that I believe that the Jewish people are the chosen people, and that means there's a responsibility. You know, there's a responsibility that a Jew has in life, and what they choose to do with that responsibility, if they choose to bring Hashem in the world, to be a light unto the other nations. To me, that spoke to me. And again, it's not trying to convert people, that you have to be a Jew, be a good person, believe that there's one God, and, you're all good in my book. But it's to be a light. And to me, that responsibility, I didn't want to live a life where I wasn't responsible. I wanted to be responsible, and to be responsible, that's connected to purpose, transcendence. And I found that within the system of Judaism, and the structure worked well for me as well. I mean, from the moment you open your eyes until the moment you go to sleep, from the moment you're born to when you pass this earth, that there's a structure of how you could best bring in Hashem's will into that. And to me, if you're serious about, if you believe there's a one God, and you believe that this one God has a will, then to me it makes the most sense, logically speaking, to try to align yourself with that will to the best degree as possible, or at least struggle to do so. And to me, it's been a struggle because it's a struggle always to overcome your own will for a will greater than you. But I would say that has lended me that has motivated me a lot to want to be follow down this path of being
Right.
Thank you for.
Yehudah, I want to spend the next couple of questions on your academic career. Questions from the floor, and then I've got a couple myself. So the first question I want to read out is, you've done so well academically. What is your academic background prior to going to prison? And how did you manage to transition into such an accomplished academic achievement post-prison?
Okay, so they offered, so in prison, they offered associate's degree for free. So they didn't have any like funding for anything else for higher education. So it essentially went up to your associate's degree. And so as soon as I got to jail, well, prior to me going to jail, I had enrolled in a community college. I didn't have any specific interest, so I didn't know what I was doing, but I know my mom wanted me in community college, so I enrolled in community college because it's, might not follow her rules in a lot of aspects, but I at least followed her rule of you got to be in college, and so I was in community college. That got cut short because I got arrested. So I only did a year of community college. It got cut short. I got arrested, and so in prison, knowing that they had an associate's degree available, I started that in Pelican Bay. And I graduated with my AA in social and behavioral sciences. That was the emphasis I had in it. And then I got kind of stuck because in order to get my bachelor's, they had correspondence courses, but it cost money that had to be paid out of pocket, and there was no government programs or anything like that. I managed to get family and friends to help subsidize that, which would be buy a class from here and there. So it never was full time. I might take one class this semester, 2 classes that semester. And so that's what I was doing while I was incarcerated. And by the time I was released, I was 21 units shy of having my bachelor's. And so to me, I realized that, I've wasted a lot of my life in prison. Don't want to necessarily say wasted because I did find Yiddishkeit, but I didn't maximize everything I could be doing in life because I was incarcerated for 16 years from the time I was 19 and to the time I was released. So I knew education was key. It was one of the only equalizers to give me a fighting chance to be anything I wanted to be outside of prison. So I immediately enrolled in those 21 units I needed. Against the advice of my student counselor who worked there, said, just take it easy. There's too many classes at one time. But nonetheless, I had a mission, and I needed to do that. And I had a child. If I want to have a family, I have to be able to provide for them. And so took those 21 units, graduated, and then the next step was social work. And so, my master's degree at the University of Southern California. So I knocked that out, and I actually started the doctorate program in January. So this is my 3rd month of the actual program. It's a 2-year program. And so I would just say, again, when you have purpose, when you have mission, and you have these goals, and you just know that it takes a lot of hard work. And I like to say, tongue in cheek, of course, that I was on a 16-year state-funded vacation. All the time I was in jail, I was free from a lot of responsibilities. And so I got to assume that, I just had all that time off. Now there's no time really to rest. I gotta work hard, because for a lot of my life, I didn't necessarily have to work hard. Like so many of you folks who didn't have to go to jail. Like me, you've worked hard throughout your whole life. I haven't done that. And so now it's my time. So that's kind of been my, motivating factors, some of the motivating factors for me to go the way I've been going hard as I have.
Very interesting, Yehudah. Yehudah, you know when you've arrived as a Jew, when someone else asks you, this is my favorite question, because every Jew wants to write a book, okay? So one of the questions on the floor is, are you writing a book? Have you even thought about it?
Yes. So I've written my book up until the time I was released from jail. So what I was doing in jail is I had access, because I was the Jewish chapel lead clerk. I had access to a typewriter, manual typewriter, and I would print out the paper. I would type up something, print it out. Since it's hard to edit it on a manual typewriter, I would use my contraband cell phone to take pictures of each page, and then I would upload it to make it a Microsoft Word document. So I have all my book written until the time I'm released from jail, and I'm hoping that after I graduate with my doctorate, and after I also finish getting my hours, about 2 years of hours I need to be a licensed clinical social worker, that I will finish the last part of my book that documents the time from my release from prison until now.
Okay, you'll send 2 autographed versions back to South Africa for me and the Rabbi. We'll get the first 2. All right.
Autograph copies your way.
Yehudah, one last question for me, then I'm going to pass you back to the Rabbi. Currently, it doesn't matter whether it's secular or Judaic, what current books are you reading?
Okay, so if anybody's in a doctorate program, you know that there's a whole bunch of articles and books that they have you read. So I'm not reading in a robust list as I usually like, as the books may indicate in the back. I don't get to read as much as I like on my own. But books I'm reading right now, there's a book, I believe it's called Torah and Rationalism, and it basically gives like a logical, shows you the logical structure to the Torah and Halakha. So that's a book I'm reading. And another book, it's secular, is The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt. And he's a social psychologist. He has a PhD in social psychology. And it's basically breaking down why there's good people on both sides of, how can good people be on both sides of politics? In America, we're very much polarized. And he kind of breaks down why there are good people on both sides. And I think it goes a long way to not demonizing people that you don't agree with based on political views. I don't believe politics is a religion. And so I believe in order to get anywhere in a democracy, you kind of have to assume that the other side is coming with the best intentions, even if you disagree with them. And so that's a book that gives me the social psychology behind people's politics.
Thank you. You know, an undercurrent in a couple of questions that have come up, or a couple of observations that have come up, are 2 points. The one is in relation to your willingness to subscribe to the will of Hashem, to let that be the dominating force, as opposed to your own will, in itself is a tremendous lesson that I think is most appropriate for all of us to be thinking about, and really quite inspiring. Another point that has come up as an undercurrent is in relation to the supportive nature of your family. And I'd imagine it extends also to your friends as well, that if you, by being surrounded by people that were supportive of this journey that you were on, it made it that much easier to go along this path. You know, you mentioned as well in relation to the jail system, that you weren't really going to them to ask them for help in relation to the future, mainly because of the fact that you didn't feel support from them to begin with. And perhaps if you did, so fundamentally you would have gone to them for advice going forward. But just to isolate this point, how important it is to be surrounded by people who are supportive and are encouraging and are there to be with you in the journey that you go on in life. Can you speak a little bit more about the support that you got from family and from friends in this regard?
Yeah, I mean, family, friends, and community. I think a lot of times, no matter what someone's intentions are, once they are released from jail, a lot of people fall back into their ways previously. Because for one, a lot of the friends you know previously know you as that person you were prior to you went to jail. And two, if you have some sort of status in the criminal world, you know, that's appeals to you and you kind of want to regain some sort of status. People want to feel important, or at least not feel like they are in a whole nother league that they're not supposed to be belong in. And so this whole other league I speak to is more sort of a world that I'm not used to. I'm not used to living in a Jewish world or a world where I wasn't actively committing crime. So me having the support of the Jewish community, right? Specifically, when I speak about the Jewish community, it's my Beth Jacob Congregation Irvine community, really was a powerful thing. And not only that, not only was the acceptance of them powerful in that regard, but it made me responsible to somebody. When you feel like, you know what, my actions are kind of will have some sort of people may understand what Beth Jacob or Irvine is by who I am when they see me. And so I always want to reflect good on my community. And so that added to it. And just for an example, I was going to school for my Master of Social Work, and a social worker, once they found out about my story, didn't know me from anything. She happens to be South African now that I think about it. Nadine Durbach, she's a licensed clinical social worker, reached out to the Rabbi Senior, and it was like, hey, I mentor people that are in the social work program. I've mentored another Jew that was going to the same University of Southern California in the social work program. Let him know if he wants me to be his mentor, I'm willing to do that. And so that kicked off a awesome friendship where I was actually being able to have somebody who's in the profession I want to pursue be my mentor. So it's just this sort of support that kept on happening in my community, and obviously with my mother and my sister and my family that continue to happen. But that support is crucial, and I think you don't realize it as much until it actually occurs. And so when people say, like, how did you do this? How did you do that? It must have been rough with the transition. I just give so much credit to my family, friends, and the Beth Jacob Congregation Irvine community for making me feel like I mattered and that I wasn't, again, and I'll keep on going back to this, that I wasn't defined by the poor choices I made in my past, that, that I could start a new life and I could be a Jew, and they would judge me. I wouldn't be judged by what I did prior to me being a Jew.
Thank you for that.
Yehudah, let's not forget that you are also a member of the base, so your actions are reflected on us as well. We made you a base member last week, and the rabbi before the show made you an honorary life member before we went live on air, so welcome.
I don't have to pay dues too. I want everybody to be my witness right there. So
you don't have?
I don't have to pay any dues. I don't have to pay any.
No dues. You're the only person in the base history, Yehudah, that doesn't have to pay fees. Right. As this is a base show, I want that on the record.
Okay.
Yehudah, we've been speaking for the better part of 2 hours between last week and this week. We've covered a great deal of ground on your early days, on your prison life, on your post life, on your Judaic career. You've now got a career, giving back to society in terms of the preamble to this webinar, which I spoke about in terms of social work. I know our time's short. This is my last question to you, Yehudah, and I'm going to hand back to the rabbi for final comments and questions from you. But what is your, if I may use the term, secular aspirations in terms of where you see yourself in the next 5-10 years?
Okay, so I'm getting my doctorate in social work. Mainly, one, I want to be able to be the most competent professional I can be in social work. And also, I want to be an educator. So I want to be able to teach at a university about social work as well. And I think some of my experience informs me, and I think it'll be a benefit for the people who I encounter in the classroom. As my specific profession relates to social work, right now, I'm an associate clinical social worker. I'm registered with the state. And after about approximately 2 years, I have to get a certain amount of hours. I will be eligible to become a licensed clinical social worker, and I'll be able to have my own private practice as a psychotherapist. So that's what I want. I want to be able to have my private practice as a psychotherapist to do that. And I'm interested in smart decarceration. And so what that is not necessarily just everybody shouldn't be in jail and let everybody out of the jail. But in California, we have the largest incarcerated population in the nation. And in America, we have the largest incarcerated population. Disproportionately, we incarcerate more of our citizens than any other country in the world. And so it's kind of looking for ways that we can kind of break this cycle of high recidivism rates. People go to jail and then they get out of jail and they go right back to jail, right? And so obviously that's not making the public safe. And obviously a lot of lives are shattered as well. Somebody goes to jail, they're not there to raise their children. They're not there to provide for their family. And that has a lot of other societal effects. And so I want to be part of that kind of solution. And so I'll be looking to do research and affect change in that area as well. So these are kind of my secular aspirations that you speak of.
Wonderful, Yehudah. And you've just got a comment on which I'd just like to just end with, which I think is reflective of everyone who's listened here. It's so heartwarming to hear your story, and particularly your current life, and you're such an inspiration. It is so wonderful how you have turned your life around. Yehudah, I couldn't say more. Personally, I've made a new friend. Thank you so very much for the willingness to appear. I think it's been world-class, inspirational, and I wish you and your family hatzlocha and brocha and only good things going forward. Thank you very much, Yehudah. I appreciate it very much.
No problem. And thank you all for having me here. I don't know, you can imagine me being in that jail cell to imagine that I would be able to speak in front of other Yids and they embrace my story and not necessarily judge me for what I was, but the Jew I am today. I appreciate that, and I appreciate you allowing me to get my story out. I wouldn't imagine anybody cared about what was going on or what I thought or anything. So just giving me this space. And I think, and I'll close with, I think it's therapeutic in a sense too, for me to be able to share my story, because it gives me, upon reflection, a better understanding of who I was then, who am I now, and who I want to be. So I thank you for that opportunity.
Wonderful. Rabbi?
Yehudah, thank you. Just to conclude, you mentioned that you couldn't have imagined that anyone would care or anyone would want to hear your story. I want to say the following to you. We all want to hear your story. We all care greatly. And your story is an incredibly important story. It speaks to the power of change, which is incredibly, incredibly important for each and every single one of us to not only hear, but to incorporate into our lives in a very real way. Your story speaks volumes about the importance of community. It speaks volumes about the importance of the positive effect that we can all have on one another. So often people think to themselves, perhaps, what difference does it make whether I smile at this person, or whether I put out my hand, or whether I, go the extra step. I don't want to say the extra mile. But the reality is, if I listen throughout your story, it's so important, the contribution of your family and your friends and the association you had with different people along the way. And that in itself is also such a tremendous, tremendous lesson for all of us to hear. And I don't want to belittle all the other many, many lessons that you have taught us in these last 2 sessions. So from the bottom of my heart personally, and certainly on behalf of the whole base community, I really want to thank you. It's really been inspiring. To thank your wife as well for allowing you onto our show, not once, but twice. And as I said in the beginning, and to echo the words of Rabbi, Hashem should bless you in this path that you have chosen and in life in general with much brocha and hatzlacha. We thank you very much. And I mean it when I say that we look forward to welcoming you in person in our community, the base community here in South Africa.
Thank you so much again. Thank you for those kind words. Amen to that, definitely. And again, I just appreciate you giving me this opportunity to speak to you all. Thank you.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you all for joining us this evening. Our shows are back on each Sunday night, series of one-on-one talks with none other than Robert Katz. The series is called the Changemaker Series. Watch this space for more details. I also want to say a very big thank you to my dear brother Moshe, as always, for his tremendous contribution to this webinar and to all of the webinars that we run. We really could not do it without you. Robert, it's always a pleasure to be on a show together with you. Thank you for everything that you do. Have a good night. Keep safe, everyone. Hope to see you all soon.